everybody, and welcome to another edition of A Girl and Her Glock. Today we will be discussing the National Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act of 2017. And if you're not familiar with this act, what it does is it requires all states to recognize concealed carry permits from every other state. Meaning that if you live in Florida like me and you want to go on vacation to New York, which currently does not recognize a Florida permit, especially New York City, you would be allowed to conceal carry a weapon because New York would be required to recognize Florida's permit. Now, you would still be required to follow all other state gun laws, such as things like magazine restrictions, where you can and can't carry, things like that. It doesn't change those laws, but the cops in New York, under National Reciprocity, the cops in New York City would be required to recognize your Florida permit, and as long as you were carrying a gun that is legal in New York, they could not stop you from carrying. They could not legally stop you from carrying. And I think that this is a very good idea. And some people will argue and say, well, we don't need national reciprocity, we already have that. The Second Amendment is our permit, and I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But unfortunately, the courts and the government don't. So if you want to stay out of jail, you need to follow the laws. And some anti-gun groups, such as Everytown for Gun Safety, that ridiculousness, they have been spreading lies saying that it would allow convicted dangerous criminals to carry guns on our streets legally and the cops wouldn't be able to stop them, and that's just bullshit. The prohibitions against who can and cannot carry a gun, like prohibitions against violent criminals carrying guns and things, that's a federal law, and that this bill does nothing to change that. They would still be prohibited from obtaining a license or obtaining a gun legally. Of course, we all know that felons and bad guys don't follow laws, so this really wouldn't change anything as far as that goes. That whole thing about them being legally allowed to carry guns now is completely, like I said, completely bullshit. Everytown pulled that out of their asses, trying to make people, trying to get people all excited and upset, and it's just not true. But like I said, this is a very positive step in the right direction. And what I would recommend you do if you live in an area like, say, the state of Hawaii, which basically doesn't issue any concealed permits at all. There was no permits issued last year, and I don't think there were any the year before. But what I would recommend you do if you live someplace like Honolulu or New York is to look into the states, start looking now into the states that offer non-resident concealed carry permits, because as I understand, the National Reciprocity Act would require all states to recognize both resident and non-resident permits. So if you live in a state that of course, like I said, if you live in an area where they don't typically issue permits, you could look up, I know that Florida offers non-resident permits, Utah offers non-resident permits, there's a lot of states that offer them. And you can look up what they require as far as training and as far as paperwork, and get that all completed and get your non-resident permit before the National Reciprocity passes. That way you'll be ready for it. And because I suspect that there's going to be a lot of people after it passes who will be applying for non-resident permits in the states that grant them, and that's probably going to cause a backlog, so you definitely want to get ahead of that as much as you can. I know the state of Florida requires proof of like NRA training with at least 4 hours class, with live, you have to demonstrate live fire. It doesn't have to be a quote-unquote concealed carry class. It can be, introduction to handguns, basic pistol, or it can, the state of Florida will accept a hunter's safety class completion too. They'll accept your hunter's card as proof. It just has to be, like I said, basically a 4-hour class ran by the NRA or the police department that demonstrates live fire. They basically just want to see that you can safely handle a gun. And of course, if you have, if you've been honorably discharged from the military, or if you were a police officer, you just submit your DD-214 or your documentation that you were a police officer, and that's all that Florida requires as far as that goes. So I would definitely look into getting a Florida permit or a Utah permit. I know those are, like I said, there's several states that issue them, but I know that those are considered to be pretty respectable. But definitely urge your congressman, contact your congresspeople, and urge them to support this bill, because it will do it will do a lot of good for a lot of gun owners, and it will make us safer. Thank you for watching. Bye.